Welcome to episode 162 of the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I'm Ashley Scott Myers, screenwriter and blogger over at sellingyourscreenplay.com. Today I'm interviewing writer, director, and producer Erin Dooley. She just did a documentary which she shot and edited herself, and she's done a ton of short films over the years too, so we talk through all of that as well. So stay tuned for that. If you find this episode valuable, please help me out by giving me a review in iTunes or leaving a comment on YouTube or retweeting the podcast on Twitter or liking it on Facebook. These social media shares really do help spread word about the podcast, so they are very much appreciated. Any websites or links that I mention in the podcast can be found on my blog in the show notes. I also publish a transcript with every episode in case you'd rather read the show or look at something later on. You can find all the podcast show notes at www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/podcast, and then just look for episode number 162. Just want to mention a free webinar that I'm doing on Wednesday, March 1st, 2017 at 10 a.m. Pacific time. It's called How to Effectively Market Your Screenplay and Sell It. I'm going to go through all the various online channels that are available to screenwriters and give you my unfiltered opinion of them. I get questions all the time about the blacklist, about Inktip, about various screenwriting contests. So in this free webinar, I'm going to talk about my experience with them. Again, this webinar is completely free. Don't worry if you can't make it to the live event. I'll be recording the event, so if you sign up and you can't actually attend the live event, you will still get a link to the recorded event after it happens. To sign up, go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/free webinar, and that /free webinar is all one word, free webinar, and it's all lowercase. I'll, of course, link it in the show notes as well. Also, if you're already on my email list, you don't need to register. Anybody who's already on my email list, I will be emailing them the details to the webinar. So once again, if this sounds like something you'd like to learn about, just go to www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/free webinar. So now let's get into the main segment. Today I'm interviewing writer, director Erin Dooley. Here is the interview. Welcome, Erin, to the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I really appreciate you coming on the show with me today.
Yep, thanks for having me.
So to start out, maybe you can give us a little bit about your background, just kind of where did you grow up and how did you get interested in making movies?
Yeah, I've been a writer for probably 15 years now. When I was a kid, I was pretty insatiable with books and I would read a lot and always thought that I would be more of a novelist. That was my dream. And then I wrote one screenplay. I had an idea, and then I was basically hooked. Opened Pandora's box and let that out, and couldn't stop writing from there. So that is my first entry. It was the writing, and then I just had some ideas that I wanted to see put on, and so I just decided to produce myself with my own stuff to get the world to see it.
Perfect. And I'm curious, how did you even get that first? The first hurdle of writing your first script? I mean, I remember for myself, I was in college. There really wasn't, it was before sort of the internet had taken off. So even finding resources about formatting and that kind of stuff. How did you get into that? Did you find a bunch of scripts that you could kind of use as a template? Did you find a bunch of books?
Yes, since I am a pretty big reader, I really wore out the library card. That was, I probably couldn't even see to open the door. I had so many books stacked up to my chin, just anything that the library had on screenwriting, both formatting and just telling stories in general. And some that had some scripts. I just got everything out of the library. I don't have a degree in film or screenwriting. I have a degree in marketing, so this was sort of new to me. So I just went to the library to learn as much as I could, and then turned to the internet to round it all out.
Yeah. So let's talk about some of the short films that you've done. You've got a good number of credits on IMDb with these short films. So let's start at the very beginning. On IMDb, it looks like your first credit, and correct me if I'm wrong, is a film called Learning to Swim. Maybe you can talk about that and actually taking that leap from, okay, now you've written a few scripts and just deciding I'm going to go and produce this. Maybe to start, you can tell us what that film is about and kind of how you made that move from just screenwriter to actually being a producer as well.
That a lot of it started, and specifically with Learning to Swim, there was the 24-hour film race in Chicago, and so just my sister and cousin we just decided that we wanted to do this, and so I wrote it, my sister directed, and my cousin acted. Two of my cousins acted in it. So it was really just sort of that pressure to create I like, because you have to do it. Sometimes you can get really bogged down in rewriting and not taking that first step. And I liked the film race that sort of just pushes you out of your comfort zone. So we just used, and like I said, we all just did it. When you're doing the speed races, you just use whatever resources you have. So a lot of my first credits, like the next probably 3 films on my IMDb, are all, again, those film races, just trying to get stuff out there and wanting to challenge myself as a writer, because with the film races, they give you, a prop, a line of dialogue usually, and a name, which whatever, characters can be named anything, but I liked being given those constraints to try to form a story within those, because, if I'm ever hired as a writer, then I'll be given constraints and given a story, and I'd have to, so I liked that sort of challenge to work as a writer.
Did you have any production experience before that? You were a marketing major, so you didn't go to film school. What was your experience? Was it literally just, hey, me and my sister and cousins were going to get a camera and start shooting?
Yeah, I mean, I guess this just popped in my head, but our experience, quote unquote, was when we were kids, we would just make sketches. We watched SNL a lot, so there's probably some embarrassing videos floating around of me being Hans and Franz with like fake muscles in my sweats. But so we would always just like grab a camera and do stuff like that. So that was the extent of our production. I mean, there was no like assistant director or production manager. Yeah. We all just chipped in and did that, so that I just learned by doing. With both the writing and the production, I would just start out very small with this, and then as I've grown in my career, I've gotten onto some bigger sets and helped other people out in different production roles.
Okay. And I noticed, too, on Learning to Swim, you're credited as the editor. Did you have any experience with editing? Or, again, it was just learning on the job right then in that 24 hours?
Yeah, I did a coworker's son, I think, with that one. It was one of the early ones. I don't remember if it was that one or the next one had wanted to. But I think I just did it myself, and probably that first one was not even on like an actual, it was on very rudimentary, like whatever comes with your computer. It wasn't even a true, like now I have Premiere Pro and I've learned how to edit. I have edited a lot now, but yeah, it was really just, they always say, you have time or you have money, and time I have, money I do not.
Yeah. So. And so was there any effort other than this 24-hour film festival, was there any effort to market it other ways? Did you try and send it to some other film festivals? Did you have success with this film festival that you did it for? That was just for that, and then it just, again, kind of planted that seed of producing and getting it out there. So we really didn't make any attempts to get it out there. It was so early. It was probably 8 years ago now, I think. So it's been quite a while. Yeah. And it's a small little festival, so it was, we didn't win anything there. It was really just about having fun with my family and getting something done. Okay, so then let's talk about the progression. You kind of just got this first film done. Take us through as you're building. Maybe the budgets are building. They're becoming more complex. Just take us through some of those steps, leveling up with each one of your shorts.
Yeah, a lot of the first few were really most of my credits are a lot of these film races that really don't have any budget. And so really, I think it was mostly when I'm from the suburbs of Chicago, and then I moved to California a year and a half ago, and I think mostly that's when I've worked on things with actual budgets. Mm-hmm. I was the assistant director on a short that had a pretty decent budget. So it's really just been me self-funding these things. And I did do a feature film called Broken and Beautiful, and that I crowdfunded. And that was, I just jumped into the deep end, because really there wasn't a huge ramp up with these shorts. It was a lot of just 5-7 minute things that I did. And then I did a 2-hour musical. So I really just sort of dove in with both feet on that. And that had a decent budget. and I directed and wrote that. And so that it's kind of laughable now to look back at how big of a project I took on, and it probably was better that I didn't baby step into that, because I probably would have been too scared to do it, because I had 12 leads in that. It had 21 songs. It was a huge undertaking, and it was almost probably better that I did it when I was a little bit green and naive and didn't realize what I was taking on.
And do you think all these short films were good preparation for that? I mean, certainly you had some confidence that you sort of knew how to direct and edit and produce and all that stuff.
Yeah, and it just gives you a little bit of confidence and just the excitement to step out your comfort zone and say, I can create. And people, even if it's a small audience, but people come up to you and say that they liked your stuff, well then, of course, that's what, all creatives, we like hearing that, that people are resonating on some level with our material. So that just gives that encouragement to keep going with it.
And I think you just said your sister directed that first one, Learning to Swim. At some point, you did segue into directing as well. And was that a conscious decision? And was there a reason for that? And how did you make that step?
My sister decided that she didn't want to do it anymore, and I still wanted my stuff made. So I do really like working with actors. I like that part of directing where you work with the actors and you get to see. I mean, up until that point, these people are just living in your head. So it's really great to work with the actors and get them to make the choices, and you're working with them. So I did like it, and I was so it was really just, I guess, on necessity that my sister bowed out of doing this. It was just for her. It was really that first one that she was only interested, and then once I was like, no, I really want to keep doing this, it was just like a fun Saturday afternoon for her, and for me, this is what I want to do and what I'm going to be pursuing. So it was out of necessity of, needing to have somebody direct, and if you can't afford to pay somebody else, then I do have some enjoyment, but after directing 2 features, and then the documentary, I know that that's not necessarily my strong suit. Writing is, so I'm scaling back from the directing part.
Okay. Now, as you've been doing these shorts, have you also been writing feature films and trying to push that angle of your career as well?
Yeah, that's where I'd like to be, is selling my feature scripts. And some of the shorts that I've done, that one was for a film race, and I'm going to be turning that into a feature. And then there's another short that I didn't produce yet, but I'm going to turn that into features. So yeah, the goal for me is always feature films. I think shorts are great. They can get your name out there. It can just be practice at telling a concise story, and it can really help you as a writer. But for me, I do like the longer stories and features, and that's my main ultimate goal, is to continue to be working as a writer for features.
Yeah. Okay, so let's dig into your latest film, A Way of Forgiveness. It's a documentary, and maybe you can just kind of give us a quick overview of it, a log line, a pitch, whatever you have, just to kind of let our listeners know what it's all about.
Yeah, it follows me. I'm the main subject of the documentary. I was walking on the pilgrimage across Spain called the Camino de Santiago. There was a movie called The Way with Martin Sheen and Emilio Estevez, like maybe 5 years ago. So I had wanted to walk this pilgrimage for about 15 years, and then my life just sort of opened up that I could take 6 weeks off, because it takes you 35 to 40 days to walk. And so I figured, well, I'd be remiss as a filmmaker if I didn't bring my camera along with me on the journey. So it just follows me. I was going through a divorce at the time, so it just tracked me as I tried to forgive what had happened in the marriage. I interviewed people along the way, and then when I got home, I still even wasn't sure if I was going to make it into a film. And then when I rewatched the footage and I saw some of the people already that I could tell were being impacted by thinking about forgiveness, and so then I figured, well, if that person could be impacted by just a mere discussion, then maybe making a film about forgiveness can help other people work on forgiveness in their own lives. So I edited myself again, because I couldn't pay anybody to do it, and put it together. So it's a 45-minute documentary that I released in November.
Okay, okay. And so maybe we can have a quick technical discussion on that. What kind of camera, and even take us back on some of these short films, if it's a different camera, but like what was the camera you used and how much does that camera cost?
For the documentary, since I was backpacking across the country, so I just had a GoPro, and because that was very light, so I got the Hero 4 for Christmas a couple months before I went on the journey. So I think that was like $250 at the time, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And then I just used a Zoom recorder, which when the sound isn't that great. I hired somebody to clean it up, but when you're on the top of a mountain and wind is whipping and you only have a Zoom recorder, the sound is what the sound is. But so for that film, and then I did shoot some B-roll that was on. I have a Panasonic. It's pretty old now. It's a GH2, and so there's most of it, like 90% of the documentary is on the GoPro. And I did in editing, I sort of blew it up a little bit to get rid of the fisheye look that the GoPro has. And the other ones were some of them were shot on my Panasonic. And very early, I just had a very, very early DSLR that it was mostly I used it for a still camera, and then it had a video function. So that camera, I don't even know what it was.
Okay. And was there any lights? Did you have any LED lights or anything, or is it just all natural light when you're shooting this documentary?
Yeah, it was just all natural because I already with the camera was carrying 20 pounds and I had only wanted to carry 15. So, because I was walking for like 8 hours a day. So if you can imagine walking up through the Pyrenees Mountains, you don't want to be carrying that much equipment. So yeah, I just got what I got. It's like the documentary in like the truest form because I didn't have any artificial lights, anything like that. I didn't prep anybody, just on camera, just started asking them questions. I didn't even map out what this was going to look like beforehand. I really just afterwards, then I took a step back and looked at myself as if I was a protagonist of a movie, and I said, okay, how is this going to become a film? And I just mapped it out like I would when I would be writing a film and built it in post like that.
Okay. And is there some kind of a structure? I mean, do you outline it? Like, did you then sit back and come up with an outline? Do you have a beat sheet? Is there a first act, a second act, a third act, a midpoint? Do you have those same sort of turning points and places in the...
Yeah, I really try to look at it in that way, and thankfully, I wasn't thankful on my journey when I had these setbacks, but then as I mapped it out and was making these beats, I was like, oh, I do have these beats of what you would put a protagonist through, and it just honestly happened. I mean, my luggage was lost for a week. I had, pains. I twisted my knee. Just all of these things that would set you back when you're watching a story about somebody walking across the country, and it just honestly happened to me. So I did shape it a little bit, put some things in different order than they actually happened, but a lot of it really did happen. So, but yeah, I definitely treated it with acting or structuring it with the act structure and really treating it like a film that I would write, a narrative.
Mm-hmm. And I think you mentioned now you're using Premiere as your editing software. That's what you edited this on, and some of the more recent shorts you've done? Yeah,
I've been using that for probably like 4 years now.
Okay.
Yeah.
And again, have you taken classes on that since you've started to use it? Do you just go on YouTube and look at tutorials? How have you learned and mastered that software?
I wouldn't say I've mastered it.
Okay.
But yeah, God bless the people that post on YouTube. I don't know what they're getting out of it, but because I had really for this one, I had some capability with Premiere, but then for this, I had to do some things that I had never done before. I had my attorney look over the film, and he's like, "Oh, you gotta, blur these people out, do this." I was like, "Blur people out? I have no idea how to do that." So then I went to YouTube and learned how to do that. So it was really just whenever I needed to know how to do something, I would just look it up online, and thankfully people post these things these days.
Yeah. And so even take a step back on that, because I know there's a lot of really new people listening to this podcast. How did you even know enough to go and get a lawyer to look over this thing? And how did you even know that that was an important thing to do with a documentary?
I think that's part of what my background is, since it isn't in, I don't have a degree in film like I mentioned, it is in marketing. So I have that business side to me where, and this is not my first feature film. I've done 2 others. So I've had to think through the distribution and other things like that. And so I've had some experience with the business side of it. And so I wanted to get in front of it ahead of time. And I'd worked with this attorney before. I had been hired to adapt a book into a screenplay. So I figured he should look at it beforehand just to cover my bases.
Okay. And do you need release forms? Is that the bottom line of these people you're interviewed? Did you have release forms? Did you have their email so you could go back later and get their release form signed?
I did have since I had done releases for all my other films, but again, I didn't want to carry things because I was hiking all the way across the country. So I actually just, in the back of my journal, I hand wrote a release, and then I just had everybody sign underneath it. And then I showed it to a producer that was at one point maybe going to get involved, and she's like, "You can't use that. That's not going to hold up." So then, thankfully, I got to be very good friends with most of the people that are in the film, and we're all Facebook friends. And so I made a true release, and I sent it to them. And one gentleman did change his mind, and I think it's unfortunate because it was a really good interview. But he said that he wouldn't sign the release, so it was what it was. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one person I had to track down. It was quite a detective game to track her down, and then I had to cut down the film from an hour and a half to 45 minutes, so her interview was sacrificed, so it didn't matter anyway.
Okay, and why did you have to cut it down to 45 minutes?
Really just for money, because the sound was so bad, and when I was talking with the post-sound guy, he was giving me a really great rate, but it was going to be per finished minute, and I just didn't have the money. I had been selling some of my possessions, honestly, to help pay for this, and I only had so much money. I couldn't rub 2 nickels together to get more money, and so I said, well, if it's per finished minute, then it's going to have to get shorter. And so I did a lot of hard editing and took a machete to it and cut it in half.
Yeah. And so you talk about the lawyer as one part of your business background. What other business stuff is involved in something like this? Were there other people that you've talked to? You mentioned distribution. Are there some other business sort of people that you've talked to and gotten involved with and started to push this out towards?
Well, since I did self-distribute it, so I've had everything. I'm basically a one-woman show. So when I hosted, premiere screenings, I was the one working with the theaters. I did all the promotion for it, and I did sell out to premieres, so I was pretty proud of that. So a lot of that is me writing press releases, trying to get press, so that the promotion part of it falls on me because I can't pay anybody to do it at this point yet. So it's, trying to get a little bit of income to try to pay somebody to help it. Just like any business, you have to spend some money to make some money, but at the beginning you do a lot of it yourself. Yeah.
So who are the people, you mentioned like the sound guy you paid. What other positions did you end up having to pay for, essentially? I'd just be curious to hear what.
Really, it was just these are the shortest credits, I think, ever in the history. It is 3 people, myself, the post sound guy, and the composer. Okay. And so it's really beautiful music. It's a friend that I've made here. And he knew of the story before he even knew that I was definitely going to make it into a film. And so he composed the music for it. So yeah, there's just 3 people in the credits beyond the people that I met that are in front of the camera, but behind the camera, there's just 3 of us.
Yeah. And so let's talk about these live screenings that you've done. Maybe you can sort of describe them, and then I'd be curious to hear how you were able to promote them and sell 2 of them out.
So I had one in LA, and then again, since I'm from Chicago area, I had one back in Chicago around Thanksgiving, so that I could go and do 2 things at once, show my film and get home for Thanksgiving. So a lot of it ended up being social media, and just reaching out to everybody that I knew. And it was on the smaller side of a theater. It was and it's a playhouse, but they had a pretty decent sized screen. And I had done another project there with another production company, And so that one, it was really, and since it's this Camino, what I walked is a pretty well-known trail, and so I reached out. I'm part of the group in LA, and so there was some promotion there. But yeah, I mean, I posted a lot on social media, and it's LA, so people waited until the last day, and then we actually oversold it the day of, because it was sold out like 3 hours before, and then people just showed up, and we're like, no, this LA, people are just gonna not show up, so you'll have room for us. And I was like, no, everybody's seated, and so we had to get a few folding chairs to squeeze a few more people in. And then in Chicago, it was, because I'm from there, it was a lot of family and friends, but then the Camino group there as well I had been a part of, so there was some people from that. So it was a lot of, it was pretty much purely social media and me just emailing people that I knew. So.
Okay. And how did you actually get the theater? Did you just call the theater up and say, can I rent it for a night? How did you negotiate that? Yeah,
it was, just, and again, this one I did find it first for my film, and then I was on another production, and so we ended up hosting something there. But yeah, I just reached out to people. I mean, in LA, it's pretty expensive to four-wall a theater. That's why this was, again, like I said, a playhouse, and it was an affordable rate. So I just emailed him and talked to him about how long I could have the facilities. And then in Chicago, it was a little bit more affordable, and then it was the discount theater, but they just revamped it, and it's a beautiful theater. They have all the leather reclining chairs. It was amazing. So people were loving it, and it was cheaper there to have more. I think it had 40 more seats, and it was cheaper rate than here. So it was both of them were really great, and
Yeah.
So yeah, just email people.
Okay, perfect. So what's next for you? Do you have another project in the works?
I am mostly still promoting this film, I have a talk to go along with this, so getting into like colleges or churches or whoever wants to host one, because the film is really impacting a lot of people. It's been very humbling to hear how people are moved by the message of forgiveness, and people have like restored relationships after watching the film, so I'm trying to really get that film out there. And then I am writing a feature film, one of the shorts that I had written a couple of years ago, and with my writers group, they just had a prompt. The one guy wanted to film something, and he said, I want to film something that is science fiction, and so that was my first science fiction that I wrote, and so I'm turning that into a feature. So that is what I'm working on next.
Okay, perfect. And how can people see A Way of Forgiveness? A Way to Forgiveness. Are you putting it up on iTunes? Is it going to be available through some of those platforms, or really anything you want to say about when it's going to be released or how people could see it?
Yeah, on my website, which is -entertainmentllc.com, and there you can buy a DVD copy of the DVD, or there's a link to Vimeo, so you can either rent it for 3 days on Vimeo, or you can buy a DVD, and both of those links are on my website.
Okay, perfect. And I will round that up definitely and put that in the show notes so people can get it. I always like to just end the interviews by asking people how others can follow you. Anything you're comfortable sharing, a Twitter handle, a Facebook page, a blog. As you just mentioned your website, so I'll definitely put that in as well. But anything you're comfortable sharing, just give it to us now, and we'll round that up for the show notes.
Yeah, I'm on Facebook and Twitter, both for my film production company, Dash Entertainment. So it's, if you look up Dash Entertainment on Facebook, and then for Twitter, it's just _entertain, because there are other Dash Entertainments with so that's the one on Twitter.
Perfect. I will get those, and I'll round those up and put them in the show notes. Erin, I really appreciate your coming on and talking with me today. Fascinating interview, and you're a real inspiration. I really like your pragmatic approach and just getting out there and doing stuff. So that's fantastic, and I wish you luck with this film.
Thank you, and thanks for having me.
Thank you. We'll talk to you later.
Okay, thanks.
Bye.
I just want to mention two things I'm doing at Selling Your Screenplay to help screenwriters find producers who are looking for material. First, I've created a monthly newsletter that will be sent directly to producers. Every member of SYS Select can submit one logline per newsletter. I went and emailed my large database of producers and asked them if they would like to receive this monthly newsletter of pitches. So far, I have well over 350 producers who have signed up to receive it. These producers are hungry for material and happy to read scripts from new writers. So if you want to participate in this pitch newsletter and get your script into the hands of lots of producers, sign up at sellingyourscreenplayselect.com. And secondly, I partnered with one of the premier paid screenwriting leads services so I can syndicate their leads to SYS Select members. There are lots of great paid leads coming in each week from our partner. Recently, I've been getting 10 to 12 high-quality paid screenwriting leads per week. These are producers and production companies who are actively looking to buy material or are actively looking to hire a screenwriter for a specific project. If you sign up with SYS Select, you'll get these leads emailed directly to you several times per week. These leads run the gamut from production companies looking for a specific type of spec script to producers looking to hire a screenwriter to write up one of their ideas. Producers are looking for shorts, features, TV, and web series pilots, so it's a huge array of different types of projects that these producers are looking for, and these leads are exclusive to our partner and SYS Select members. To sign up, go to sellingyourscreenplayselect.com. Again, that's sellingyourscreenplayselect.com. So on the next episode of the podcast, I'm going to be interviewing actor, writer, and producer Christina Moore. She just did a film called Running Wild starring Sharon Stone. We talked through the whole process from writing the script to getting it funded to getting Sharon Stone attached to it. So keep an eye out for that episode next week. To wrap things up, I just want to touch on a few things from today's interview with Erin. I've talked about doing shorts quite a bit on this podcast, so hopefully Erin's interview can inspire you to get out there and make it happen. Also, hopefully it's a real nuts and bolts kind of an interview where you can actually see what one person has done. Again, hopefully that will inspire you, but also give you some, just technical confidence that you can do it too. Sometimes you just have to jump into the pool and start doing stuff. I think Erin is a great example of that. Really listen to how she started. She just got out there and just did a short film. She didn't have a ton of experience. She didn't know a ton of the technical stuff, but that's how you learn it. You just get out there, you do stuff, and you will pick this stuff up. I'm curious to get some feedback from people on this episode. I've got another similar episode planned in the next couple of weeks, where I'm going to be interviewing a guy who recently did a short film that I really liked, and I asked him to come on the interview and kind of give us a real detailed account of how he produced that short film. So I really enjoy these nuts and bolts episodes. I feel like I learn a lot from people just hearing them kind of explain through exactly what they did, and even just technical stuff that doesn't necessarily pertain to me, like the different types of cameras. I'm not an expert on these cameras, but you can go and Google these cameras pretty easily. You can listen to what kind of cameras they're using, Google them. You can get a sense for how expensive this stuff is, and sort of where they are as far as the the marketplace with these cameras. Is that going to be a good fit for you? So all that information, I don't necessarily absorb it right then, but it is something that I can think back on. If I ever want to shoot something, this would be an interview I would come back and kind of listen to some of the stuff that Erin has done to get this stuff finished. I think it's interesting the way she talked about her documentary, what she paid for. Obviously paying someone for the sound edit is very, very important. I'm getting ready to go through that with my own film, The Pinch. I'm just about to lock pictures, so I'm going to be bringing on a dialogue editor, someone who can really go in there and clean up the dialogue, and then obviously all the other sound stuff. But these sorts of things are important to sort of start to understand, especially if you're going to do a little bit of producing, even on a short film. I think, again, just hearing Erin talk and getting sort of a sense of the scope of what you're going to need to do is important. But really listen to that. I think she said on her first short, they spent like $100. I mean, this doesn't have to be expensive. In this day and age, most of this stuff, whether it be software, as long as you have a computer already, most of the editing, you can get free editing software. Cameras are really cheap. Most of us have cameras on our cell phones. You can go and shoot a film on that just to get started. And really the cost is almost negligible at this point. Again, just to do a little short film, just to get something done, see your work produced, and maybe enter some film festivals. But at the very least, you can get it up on YouTube and just start to get some feedback and start to network and just get your career going. Anyway, so if you have any feedback on today's episode or just these types of episodes in general, please do email me or tweet it or post a comment on Facebook or YouTube. I try and look at all those comments, whether they be on Facebook or on YouTube. I try and at least look at and respond to people that tweet at me. And you can always send an an email as well, info@sellingyourscreenplay.com. So I'm always curious to get feedback on episodes and just hear people, oh, I like this episode, I didn't like this episode. Just kind of tell me, and this isn't just for this episode, but any episode, if you particularly like an episode or particularly don't like an episode, just send in emails, because I do kind of just like to hear what people are liking, and I can push the podcast in whatever direction listeners want to go. So if I get a lot of feedback on a particular episode that it's something people really like, I can kind of push off in that direction. And I know this is sort of a screenwriting podcast, and I wonder how much of this sort of producing, getting into the nuts and bolts of producing, how many people are really interested in that. So feedback is very much appreciated. If you have a minute, drop me a line. Anyway, thanks for listening, and that's our show.